welcome to this edition of The Living Legends. My name is Edmund Mudibo. In this episode, we speak to a person who was given an opportunity to advance his education beyond primary school and is now back at the same institution as the leader. In this episode, we hear from somebody who was part of a team of technocrats that delivered the concept of Dream Team. But the then President Daniel Arap Moi played a long political game on their efforts. Besides that, he headed one of the big 4 audit firms in the region, but on retirement, took up the role of his alma mater. In this edition of The Living Legends, we hear from the man who was the boss of KPMG East Africa, but has gone back to his alma mater, Starehe Boys, as director, or in the old terms, headmaster. Mr. Josephat Mwaura, karibu sana. Welcome to Living Legends.
Thank you very much, Edmund.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Edmund.
Great to see you. And the very first question is about your early life and education. Give us some insights.
I was brought up in Kiambu. And when people speak of Kiambu, I come from a part of the county where we grew up in extreme poverty. The third born in a family of 10. My firstborn brother dropped out of school in Form 2. My second-born sister dropped out of school in class 6. I was a third born. I normally ask people, if you know a little bit of math, when was I supposed to drop out of school? But God was good, and we grew up as a large family, taking responsibility as workers. I keep saying these days children are having a free ride. We were workers. And I was actually saved from that trajectory by an accident. At the age of 6, I was knocked into a shop and spent about 6 months in hospital. And when I came back, my brain was different. And from that moment on, I was on top of my class, and I had a joyous time in primary school. My primary school headmaster then noticed this guy comes from this poor family. He's very bright, and he's going nowhere. So he went to Starehe and got me the application form, brought it to me. Mr. John Wainaina, I never forget the man. He's still a friend today. And that's how I ended up in Starehe Boys Center.
And indeed, because at Starehe Boys Center, it was very synonymous with the larger-than-life person of Geoffrey Griffin, who was director at the institution.
Yes.
And what were the life skills that were instilled to you at Starehe Boys?
I think Starehe, first of all, had 3 founders. Geoffrey Griffin was the best known of them because he was the initiator, but he had 2 colleagues that he had come with to Starehe. One, a man by the name Joseph Kamiro Gekubu, and the other Jeffrey Gatama Geturo. The first lesson is about the unity amongst these 3 men and their diversity. So Geoffrey Griffin was the son of a colonial policeman and had gone to then Prince of Wales Nairobi School. And these other 2 Africans had dropped out of school. And they met on the opposite sides of a prison wall and became friends and worked together for life. So that's the first lesson in Starehe, is about diversity. We bring children from across the entire nation, and you form a brotherhood, a fraternity that works together for life. In fact, in some cases, even beyond life. The second thing about Starehe is that you build a sense of personal identity, personal belief, and personal responsibility. So when you come into Starehe, duty is sublime, right from Form 1 up to the time you leave. In my case, I left at Form 6. And you are given particular responsibilities. So Starehe is ran by the boys, and you're given those responsibilities, and you learn how to run an institution by the time you leave Starehe. I keep saying all that I am was actually made in Starehe.
Interesting, because then maybe you could explain. You told us the accident got you to become a SWAT,
yes,
that got you into Starehe.
Yes.
And I assume that you then loved numbers, because you got into the financial service sector after school.
Yes.
What was the entry and growth process for public accountants?
For me, I actually got into accounting by an accident.
Another accident?
Yes. Because when I left my A-levels, I was actually admitted to the University of Nairobi to study building economics. But at that time, we had to wait about 2 years before going into university because of the interruption in tertiary education by the attempted coup in 1982. So as I was waiting to join university, then I got this opportunity at Coopers and Lybrand. So we're just applying. We had been taught at Starehe that once you're out there, you have to learn how to access opportunities. And so I got this opportunity, got interviewed for it, and got a temporary job as a clerk, as an accounting clerk. But again, the lesson you learn in Starehe is one of excellence. If you're given a coffee cup to wash it better than it has ever been washed. So I took it to this job, and Coopers then gave me a scholarship to Strathmore. And that's how I ended up moving into accounting and living the world of building economics and quantity surveying, yes.
And then I guess I see here Strathmore comes into picture.
Yes.
And of course it has its value system, and
yes.
You know, what is it like at Strathmore?
So mine was actually particularly challenging because the scholarship I got from Coopers required me to work during the day and then to go for my classes in the evening. And so your time, you know, was structured. You had nothing to spare. And when you go into Strathmore, you find all these professionals. And I remember encountering Jim McPhee and his larger-than-life character. I remember my accounting lecturer, a Filipino man. And you just had to apply yourself. Nobody, again, almost the same ethos from Starehe. There's nobody pushing you. You are here for your own purpose. You're here for your own dream. And you leave Strathmore with that outcome. Now, the scholarship was by Coopers, right? Yes, it was.
The institution, Strathmore.
Yes.
Then you betrayed the cause because you then didn't go back to Coopers, but you went to KPMG.
I stayed in Coopers for 7 years. So that's where I qualified. And then in 1989, there was a merger, little-known merger between Coopers and Deloitte.
Yes.
And the firm here, the Deloitte firm here, did not merge. And there were a number of people who were in the Deloitte firm here who then came across to Coopers and Lybrand. And at that time, I was ready to rise to the next level. But all these people came and slotted in these positions that we were looking forward to. And, you know, one of the wrong decisions I made in my life, I was a little upset and left to go and join Oxford University Press as the financial controller. And there I worked for 2 years as the financial controller for Oxford University Press in East Africa, and then left Oxford University Press in somewhat dramatic circumstances. I was fired. I was trying to do certain things that did not sit too well with everybody else, and that's when I went into consulting. So it's through that consulting as an independent consultant that I met KPMG, because I was doing a piece of work for them in Magadi. We were helping to set up Magadi Railway. So I spent 15 months in Magadi setting up Magadi Railway. And after I finished that piece of work, then we had a conversation with KPMG and I joined them in 1995.
And now you've consulted for various governments, and let's look at some of them.
Yes.
And institutions like the Kenya Anti-Corruption Authority strategy.
Yes.
How did this impact Kenya?
Oh, that was a very interesting piece of work, 1999, with the retired Justice Aaron Ringera. So we won a piece of work to assist the then Kenya Anti-Corruption Authority to develop an anti-corruption strategy. And I remember we used to sit very early morning with the commissioners and the directors and craft this strategy. And basically we said that CASA's job was to create an ecosystem to fight corruption. and then to focus on investigation and prosecution of particular cases. And after this strategy, I remember we met with a whole group of stakeholders at the Kenya School of Monetary Studies to talk about that ecosystem. And it seemed to be taking off. But then I think CASA took on that job with a bit too much enthusiasm, and were picking on people who are not supposed to be touched, and as a result, the entire organization was proscribed by a court decision. So I believe it is December 2001 that CASA was declared unconstitutional and basically wound up. And that for me was one lesson about fighting corruption. You have to bring a lot of wisdom to fighting corruption, because corruption can end the life of an institution like that if it becomes too enthusiastic.
Now, you also consulted for the government of Kenya that saw the reduction of ministries from, again, you're good in numbers, 16?
No, 33.
33 to 16?
Yes, yes.
And the entry of the dream team of technocrats.
Yeah. The objective was to reduce the cost structure. So the votes, and so to remain to 16. But President Moi, the late President Moi, still had a political objective, which is to keep his constituents happy. And so he decided to double head, and in some cases to triple head ministries. So even though the votes were reduced to 16, there were ministries that had 2 ministers or 3 ministers in some cases. And so it was a win-win in some respect. And it's after that then he brought in the dream team to try and deliver the reform that was intended to recover the economy.
And you consulted for the government of Uganda on performance management, and the Rwanda Revenue Authority on improving their performance. Now, between 2001 and 2004, the world of financial reporting and public accountancy was shaken by the Enron scandal, and Arthur Andersen, which was on the big 5 audit firms, folded. What were the fundamental changes in the way financial reporting is carried out after that event that shocked the world?
I think it goes even beyond financial reporting, because it actually goes to governance of entities. And what happened at that time is that you realize, as an auditor, as an external party, you have very little influence over the policies, over the governance of an institution. And you depend on, the term we use now is those charged with governance. And so, part of the change was for professional firms to pay greater attention on who you go to bed with as a client. So a lot more due diligence, a lot more client evaluation, engagement evaluation in terms of establishing, is this a team that you can trust? Is this a team that you can depend on in terms of the information and explanations they provide before you decide to go in to work with them?
What are some of the highs and lows of your stay there?
I think for me, KPMG, the first high was just the recognition of the quality of people that we have in this region. And I remember, before I even assumed the role of CEO, I was responsible for strategy and people. And we used to make a very bold statement that we will go out to the universities, we will attract the best and the brightest, and if these individuals invest 5 to 7 years within the firm, they can then access any opportunity anywhere within the world. And we tested that by bringing them in and then positioning some of them to compete for those positions within the global network. There was a global mobility program where an individual in Nairobi or in Johannesburg could compete for a position in New York, in London, in Sydney. And a number of people then come together, they are interviewed, and the best gets that opportunity. And we had a number of people being posted around the world winning those opportunities.
After leaving KPMG, you took up the role of director at the Starehe Boys Center.
Yes.
You could have been a PS, a CS, a diplomat, you name it. Why do you take up the role of heading your alma mater?
There's a little bit of history to that. In 2013, I had been elected the chair of the Alumni Association, the Old Starehe Society. And the reason for that, and we can be honest here, is that the founder director died in June 2005. His designated successor, Yusuf Kingala, died less than 6 months later. So the intended transition in Starehe Boys Center did not happen. And so over this 7-year period, there were certain challenges. And so a number of the old boys came to me, and initially I resisted and said, you know, we have a challenge in the Boys Center, and we need the Alumni Association to help with this. And so I was asked to sit at the helm of the Alumni Association, and in that process then got to sit in the board of the center and got to understand what was going on. And for me, when I realized, you know, the change that was required, I look back at my own life. And as I keep saying, all that I am was made in Starehe. And if Starehe is not delivering to its mission of providing care and education for boys in need and inspiring them to transform into productive and exemplary members of society, I would not have been who I am. Mm-hmm. And so if that is not happening for the current generation, I had to step in a volunteer capacity and make it possible. And it's a very humbling role because you're not bringing in your own skill, you're coming to learn what the founders had established and sustain that legacy, and you're doing so under the scrutiny of over 14,000 alumni who know what Starehe means to them. So it's a very, very humbling role, and it's been deeply fulfilling, very challenging because of the context we are in and the challenges that young people are going through, but deeply fulfilling, and we are happy to see some of the results of the transformation now.
And indeed, as we speak about matters education, yes, where you've gone full circle,
yes,
very briefly as we wind up, there's a nexus between education and the state we're in, yes, as a country today, yes, in matters constitution, yes, and I'm looking at Uraia.
Yes.
Yes.
So one of the other places that I serve as a trustee of Uraia. I also serve as a trustee of Palm House, where we sit together, and as a trustee of the Jim McPhee Education Trust as well. So all of this are education related. Uraia is different in that it is about civic education. It's about equipping Kenyans with the knowledge of the Constitution and the laws to enable them to effectively participate and realize their own aspirations, not just for themselves, but also for posterity. And quite honestly, the Constitution, you know, Uraia has published many of these and distributed both in English and Kiswahili, because the challenge that we face in Kenya today is that this Constitution is a people constitution. The sovereign are the people of Kenya. But in my view, we have a broken sovereign. We have a broken sovereign who do not understand the Constitution. We have a broken sovereign who do not understand the values that are required to bring this Constitution to life. And as a result of lack of that knowledge and lack of those values, the Kenyans who are making these decisions are making the wrong decisions. And we end up with the challenges that we see today. And so until the Kenyan understands that you have to transform self to the right values, to make the right decisions, then we will have this problem. And the challenge I've seen through the education sector is that that problem is actually being created within the education sector. The foundation of a nation is family, the education, and faith. And basically, family actually also creates faith. But especially through the formative years in education, we are seeing the tenets of corruption being introduced at that level. In the way you admit children to school, in the way that school is managed, they can see that this is not right, and yet you're preaching this every single day. So by the time this child comes out of university, they have been shaped by perverse values, and you're spending the next 40 years trying to transform them. No wonder you're then spending 40 years in the wilderness. And so we have to get the education right, which is where CBC is also coming in, focusing on character, focusing on values. Because if you get that 14-year-old to 18-year-old right, then you have a better chance of transforming the nation.
Any word of advice as parting shot to those who would like to get into public service? Do we still have hope?
Oh yes, we have hope. We have hope. The challenge with public service is that it must be a personal calling. And I keep saying, in the current environment, it is like playing survivor. You have to outplay, outwit, and outlast the forces that are around you. Because when you are in power, you must understand that those who are not in power, their primary agenda is to make you look bad, so that they can access that power. And when you work in a corrupt environment and you try and bring noble values, the primary agenda of the corrupt, as we said, the Kenya Anti-Corruption Authority, is to pull you down. So you have to bring great wisdom, great courage and humility as you do so, but a real focus on the agenda, on the results, on the legacy that you need, and bring unprecedented focus to delivering it.
Asante sana Bwana Josephat Mwaura. Yes. It's been a pleasure. I wish you had more time.
Wow.
You truly are a living legend. It's been a pleasure speaking to Josephat Mwaura, who has given us his post-retirement years to managing an institution that gave him a chance in life, the Starehe Boys Center. Mr. Mwaura was head of KPMG East Africa, and this means he could be on any blue chip firm, for that matter, in this world, or on the board of any big firm in Kenya. But he took up the heavy role of taking charge of his alma mater, Starehe Boys Center. Thank you, Mr. Mwaura.
Thank you very much, Edmund. Thank you.
Your story is inspiring. And from all who've made this possible, we thank you too for watching. I'm Edmund Mudibo.